Thank you guys for joining this evening. We are so excited to have you here. I just want to introduce myself as we get started here. My name is Kamika Campbell, and I am representing our organization tonight, New Pennsylvania Project. We are so excited to have this presentation for you. We are so excited that so many of you are joining us. Over 50 people have joined the presentation so far, and growing. Over 60 people, excuse me, and growing. So thank you so much. So welcome to our virtual town hall. We're going to do some housekeeping. We will introduce tonight's speaker, and we will have a Q&A. And we want you to ask those questions that are pertinent to the discussion. We also will have a call to action for you and some closing remarks. So please go ahead and make sure that you are asking those questions that are pertinent to the conversation. We will ask you to mute your incoming lines, your side of the conversation, your phones or your computer, so that we can keep the noise to a minimum, as this presentation is being recorded. Okay, this presentation is being recorded, so please mute yourselves. We will be able to again have your questions in the chat, and we want them to be pertinent to the discussion. All right. As we are moving into our presentation hour right now, I do want to let you know about a little more information about New Pennsylvania Project. Put it in the chat if you've heard of the New Pennsylvania Project before. I just want to see if who has heard from us and who you are. So let's go ahead and hear about that. Have you heard of NPP? Well, if you haven't, I'll tell you about our mission. The New Pennsylvania Project is a voting rights organization with a year-round primary focus on voter registration, civic education, and mobilization. NPP centers historically disenfranchised and often neglected Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, immigrant communities, and youth in our work. Through civic engagement, we ensure all eligible voters feel compelled to exercise their freedom to vote in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And also, to the core of our information this evening, the Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania's mission is an advocacy project of the New PA Project Education Fund, seeking to protect the independence of our state and federal courts and educate the electorate about their importance. This is very timely right now. I know you guys are seeing the news and everything that is happening. And as I'm looking into the chat, we have folks who absolutely have heard of the project before now. Yes, says Julia. And someone said yes and donated. And we thank you so much for that. And we'll have more information later in the presentation on how to donate and to help us continue this work. And we have someone who, Loretta, thank you for actually being honest. I'm not familiar with it, but we hope tonight you will get a little more information and also come into the fold and support this work. So we thank you so much for joining, even though that you are not familiar just yet, but we welcome you and we welcome you into the family. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Janitha this evening to do the welcome for tonight's speaker.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. Janitha Short, she, her. I am the Director of Staff and Culture. And again, thank you all for sharing with us this evening. Khadija Kenner is our founding Chief Executive Officer of both the New PA Project Education Fund and the New Pennsylvania Project. Khadija is a tireless advocate for social and economic justice issues and is motivated to empower and excite the electorate to enthusiastically vote in every election, all the way down the ballot. Khadija has led efforts to stop the passage of judicial gerrymandering, constitutional amendments, raise the minimum wage, fairly fund public education, protect federal courts from problematic judicial nominees, and protect the state courts from extremist attempts to undermine their independence. Khadija also serves as co-chair of Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania, an advocacy project seeking to protect the independence of our state and federal courts and educate the electorate about their importance. Prior to working in issue advocacy, Khadija was a director, producer, and writer for HBCU sports television programming, both live and scripted television, in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Atlanta, Georgia. The Temple University graduate, resides in the Philadelphia suburbs, and counts civil rights organizing icon and Westchester, Pennsylvania native Bayard Rustin as one of her civil rights heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, our own Miss Khadija Kenner.
All right. Thank you, Janitha. Thank you very much. All right. Let's take the presentation down for just a second. Katie, thank you. I just want to see some of the faces joining this call this evening. This is our fourth town hall of a series of 4 virtual town halls. And I see a lot of familiar faces have joined us for multiple town halls. Anybody in the chat want to type in if you've attended all 4 of these town halls? I'd love to know. Anybody attend all 4 of these virtual town halls we've had so far? Type it into the chat. We'd love to see it. All 4. All right. So you do not need to have attended all 4 to understand what's going to happen tonight. I will do a brief recap of the previous 3 to get us all to a place that we're feeling good about tonight's presentation. I want to give a shout out to some of the folks I'm seeing in the Zoom room tonight. I see John Coffey, my friend, my bodyguard, and John Coffey, my brother in arms, and my jail buddy. We've been incarcerated together in this work. Hi, John Coffey. I want to see who else is out here today. I see some of our staff members have joined us this evening. So good to see the staff of the New Pennsylvania Project here with us this evening, and those who are working on the Why Courts Matter PA campaign. So good to see everybody. All right, well, it's interesting times we're living in, right? And typically, whenever I do a presentation, when I do them in person, the first question I ask the audience is, how are we all doing today? And usually the immediate response is, okay, we're good. And then I say, stop lying and tell me the truth. How are you really doing? So I would love it if you want to go ahead and engage in the chat box. Tell us how you're really doing right now in this moment. Tell us how you're really doing. I want to see how you're really feeling about what's happening. What is making you concerned? What might be stressing you out a little bit? What keeps you up at night? Feel free, type it in the chat. I would love to see it. This is a town hall, and so I do have a short presentation for you this evening, and we're going to have a lot of time for Q&A. So I hope that you all are watching and listening and getting your questions. Write them down so that you can type them into the chat or type them into the chat right away. We're going to have a lot of Q&A tonight. This is a town hall, and so if we have elected officials that won't come and talk to us, we can talk to each other. And we're going to make sure we get so many of your questions answered this evening. Okay. All right, Katie, let's go back into the presentation and let's talk about it tonight. All right, this is my main man, John Lewis. He's also behind me, the same picture behind me here in my home office. And John Lewis, the late John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, reminds us that the vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent that we have in a democratic society. All right, birthplace of American democracy, Pennsylvanians, we are very powerful. We are very powerful because we have the power to vote for our judges and justices. There are only 7 states in the entire Commonwealth that have this type of power, in which we vote for all of our judges and justices in partisan elections. Pennsylvania voters very powerful. I see folks joining us from Louisiana tonight who they're going through their own situation there in Louisiana about votes not mattering, changing the districts, and lots of concerns across the country. Here in Pennsylvania, we've had our issues. And so tonight we're going to talk about what we can do. I want you all to leave here this evening with a plan and knowing that there's something we can do. We're not powerless in this moment. We are powerful, and the power of the people is always stronger than the people in power. All right, first slide of the evening. Here we go. So here's some headlines you may have seen in your Facebook feed, or you've watched this on TV, or someone has shared a meme with you via text message, or you're maybe still on X, or you're someplace else. And so this is a reminder that our democracy is fragile in this moment and that the courts matter. I'm thinking right now about here, 2 of our United States Supreme Justices who have made comments about what is happening in this current moment. If you look at the picture on the right, that is Justice Alito, our very own Justice Alito out of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, now United States Supreme Court Justice. And, you know, it's very interesting times right now. What is the United States Supreme Court going to do? Are they going to uphold the rule of law? Are they going to interpret the Constitution in a way that is fair and just and follows the rule of law. You see statement here from our Chief Justice, John Roberts. This is his court. This is his United States Supreme Court in this moment. And he says, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. This is Chief Justice John Roberts. We will see what happens. Next slide. More on the left, you see comments that were made by U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who floated the possibility of eliminating courts, federal courts. This is not something that has never happened before. This has happened before. Congress does have that ability to eliminate lower courts in the federal government. So floating the idea of that is just another attack on our independent branch of government. For the Louisiana folks, we got something here for you today from the ACLU. They're fighting right now for Black voters in Louisiana, that they're fairly represented in the state's congressional maps, right? And the Supreme Court is hearing this case. This is what is happening in this moment. Next slide. And then Donald Trump himself, claiming nearly limitless power for himself through a campaign to legitimize institutions that have long acted as checks on the presidency, according to NBC News, and that Trump officials raise stakes in showdowns with judges. So it's interesting times that we're living in. Some of you have been around and have witnessed different changes throughout history. We're currently in potentially a constitutional crisis of our own. And if we are not allowing for the separation of our branches that are equal, co-equal branches of government, we are in trouble. And so I want us all to make sure we're getting the information that we need so that we feel really good about advocating for ourselves and our agencies. Okay, next slide. Now, what does judicial independence mean? So this is a refresher. If you attended Town Hall 101, you saw this slide during the 101 slide. And what is it that we're looking for? What is it when we say we want judicial independence? What does that mean? And so there are principles of an independent and accountable judiciary. We want them to be impartial. This is both our state and our federal courts. We want them to be impartial. We want them to be free from conflicts of interest and undue influence. We want them to be ethical, that they follow clearly defined rules of behavior. We want them to be fairly selected in a fair and impartial way as possible, where the process is insulated from political pressures. Again, in Pennsylvania, we are very powerful in that we get to elect all of our judges and justices in partisan elections. Makes us very powerful. This is the fair selection process that we have here in the Commonwealth. That the courts are transparent, that they operate with full disclosure of a judge's financial obligations and ties, their interests tying to special influence, elected judge, and how judges are selected for those of us who elect our judges. We want to make sure the process is transparent. I would like to know who is sending you away on a fantastic trip on a boat. I want to know about that. And I want to know that if you have ties to this individual, do you owe them some favors? We want to know that. Evaluated and monitored, that the performance is regularly evaluated by a neutral, nonpartisan, non-interested group. I think about the American Bar Association, National Bar Association, and others who make sure that we know exactly who these folks are, who would like to represent us on benches and be able to disperse justice upon us. That our courts are resourced, that they are publicly funded and fully funded and protected, and hopefully not threatened to have their funding removed if they are not making decisions that some do not like. It is very important for our courts to be fully funded because when it's your day in court, it should be timely. We want the process to move. And also discretion, and that judges have the ability to make appropriate decisions, accounting for specific circumstances such as sentencing and bail and early release. These are the things that we're looking for as Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania when we talk about what does an independent judiciary look like. And when we make our decisions about this coming May 20th for our primary election, and then again on November 4th in the general election, keep in mind that these are the things that we should be thinking about and wanting in any individual who wants to represent us on a bench. And in Pennsylvania, they have very long terms, 10-year terms for the intermediate, common pleas, intermediate appellate, common pleas, and also United States Pennsylvania Supreme Court, 10-year terms. Magisterial judges have a 6-year term before their next retention. So it's a long time to be on the bench, and we want to make sure that who we put there on the bench deserves to be there. All right, next slide. This is our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. If you've never seen them before, here's a nice picture of all 7. There are 7 justices on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court compared to the 9 that sit on the United States Supreme Court. Fun fact, Pennsylvania has the oldest Supreme Court in the country. That makes sense, being the birthplace of American democracy, even older than the United States Supreme Court, founded in 1722. And it is the highest appellate court in the land here in Pennsylvania. 7 justices that serve 10-year terms. Currently, there are 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. They were elected as these political parties when they were originally elected to office for their first of 10-year terms. Next slide. Now, we have very important retention elections this year. Pennsylvania is going to be back on the national watch list of what's happening here in the Commonwealth. Just like Wisconsin is currently on the watch list, people paying attention to what's happening in Wisconsin as they have a very important Supreme Court race happening very soon. And so here in Pennsylvania, the 7 justices that you saw a picture of earlier, 3 of which are up for retention election this year, meaning they were elected in 2015. And so now it is time for us to decide as the electorate whether or not they should be serving another 10-year term. And so those justices are Christine Donahue, who I had the pleasure of meeting just this last Sunday in Lebanon County, David Weck, and also Kevin Doherty. These 3, all 3, elected as Democrats initially in judicial elections. You saw the D after their name when, if you were one of those folks who voted them in to the bench, you saw the D after their name. Now, retention elections are a little different. It is a nonpartisan retention election, meaning you will not see a D or an R after their name. You will only see their name on the ballot, and then you will have the decision to make yes to retain or no to not retain them. And for us to have different justices on the bench at a later date. There will be a period of time, perhaps, if 1 or all 3 are not retained, that we would go through a certain amount of time without a full complement of Supreme Court justices, and that would absolutely cause a little bit of chaos and delay justice and decisions that need to be made. Okay, next slide. Now, I want you all, this is a repeat of Town Hall 101, 201, 301. We have previously talked about the various attacks that have been made on our Pennsylvania Supreme Court over the years. That first attack being the attempts to impeach our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices who made the determination that our congressional maps were politically gerrymandered. And if you recall, we had some of the most gerrymandered maps in the country. I know Louisiana's on here today. She might argue with us a little bit about that. But Pennsylvania absolutely had one of the most gerrymandered maps in the country. And it was a decision made by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 2018 to say these maps are politically gerrymandered. They are not a fair representation of this Commonwealth. They should be redrawn, and they led to having a stellar individual who was world-renowned for map making create a map for Pennsylvania that is a lot more fair. Is it perfect? No map probably is perfect, but it is a lot more fair than it previously was. Well, that decision caused ire of some in our state General Assembly who thought that they made the wrong decision. They thought they overstepped, and so they said they wanted to impeach the democratically elected justices on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That was the first attempt to attack our Supreme Court and the integrity and independence of that court by another branch of government. Well, when the impeachment did not work, they moved on to something else called judicial gerrymandering. And for more than 2 years, we fought back as a coalition, a fight back table, to ensure that the same elected officials who gerrymandered the congressional maps previously didn't have the opportunity to gerrymander judicial districts. And what they wanted to do in 2019 was change the way in which we elect our judges. Today, we all have the ability to elect all 31 appellate court judges. If you're around long enough in Pennsylvania, you have that opportunity to elect all 31 of our appellate court judges. Well, there was attempts by some, House Bill 38, 2019 through 2021, where the zombie bill finally died, that we stop that constitutional amendment from reaching your ballot. It would have changed the Pennsylvania Constitution, and it would have changed how powerful you are as Pennsylvanians to cast a ballot for every single appellate court judge, not just one from the Commonwealth Court, one from the Superior Court, and one from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, being that you'd only be able to vote for 3 instead of 31. So we were very successful as a campaign in fighting back against judicial gerrymandering, and you never saw it on your ballot, thankfully. And now here we are, present day 2025. The third attempt is that if you can impeach them and you can gerrymander them out of their seat on the bench, then you might run a campaign to stop them from being retained. And this is absolutely what is happening here in 2025. We have dark money entering the picture here in the Commonwealth, where people are trying to sway you to make a decision. Today's call is a nonpartisan call. We're not here to tell you which way to go. We want to give you factual information so that you can make the best decisions for yourselves and your family and your community. But please know that just like Wisconsin is getting a lot of attention in this moment, Pennsylvania is about to join that. And we're about to be put on the national stage once again as it relates to our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We know that the courts are the places people go for justice. They can sometimes look to be abstract. We may not recognize them as making any impact on our lives, but we know over time how impactful they have been. And when you cannot count on your federal government, or you cannot count on the executive branch, or you can't count on the legislative branch, historically, it has been the judicial branch that has been the firewall to protect us against any threats to our rights and our freedoms. And if we lose the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's integrity, we lose a lot. And we lose the opportunity to protect our rights and our freedoms. Those of you who attended Town Hall 201 or 301 heard me talking about how the Pennsylvania Constitution, which is actually thicker than the United States Constitution, is actually the ceiling of our rights. The United States Constitution, a much smaller document, is the floor. It gives us our very basic rights and freedoms, but it is the Pennsylvania Constitution that our state Supreme Court justices are determining whether or not laws being passed by the legislative branch are constitutional. It is that branch of government that is making sure that our rights and our freedoms are protected, and they can grant us more rights than even the federal government can. 2 of those being that as a Pennsylvanian, you are guaranteed under the Pennsylvania Constitution clean air and water. Clean air and water is guaranteed in the Constitution for all of us. All right, so those were the attacks on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Now tonight, the 401, now that we're all caught up on 101, 201, and 301, I want to talk to you tonight about cross-filing. This might be a new term for some of you. Some of you have already have complete understanding of what cross-filing is, but I want to make sure you all understand this evening, because this is the election year in which some candidates can cross-file. So what does cross-filing mean? Cross-filing, otherwise known as electoral fusion, that's probably a word out of California because California does the same thing, is when a candidate runs in the primary election of not only their own party, but also that of one or more other parties. And that only allowed, this is only allowed in municipal elections, most common in school board elections, and also municipal judges elections. There's been several attempts to eliminate the practice. All 3 efforts in the last 10 years or so have been led by Republican legislators wanting to undo the practice of cross-filing. Next slide. All right, so some facts about cross-filing. So we all know that Pennsylvania is a closed primary state, one of only 9 in the entire country, right? So maybe that's a question maybe we were asked back in 11th grade. How many states are closed? Pennsylvania is one of the 9. We are a closed primary state, meaning we can only vote for candidates of the political party that we belong to on primary election day. And so if you are a registered unaffiliated, no affiliation to either political party, major political party, you cannot vote for candidates on election day on May 20th. You'll be turned away unless where you live has some type of constitutional amendment question or some type of referendum question on your ballot for you to answer. That would be the only ballot that you would receive on election day if you are not registered with one of the 2 major political parties. So Pennsylvania being a closed primary state, we have to make sure that the electorate is registered with a party. So the cross-filing occurs more frequently in local elections than it does in the midterm elections or presidential election. And I would say that in Pennsylvania, it's only allowed in the local elections to cross-file. And this is because these election years, the offices are, I'm sorry, in presidential election years or midterm election years, those offices are inherently partisan, right? So you're going to elect the president of the United States based upon their platform, based upon their political party. So they're inherently partisan. Well, local elections, such as your school board and judicial elections, are perceived to be nonpartisan. There should not be a Republican or a Democratic way to interpret the Constitution. But we know that human nature tells us that there will be ways in which jurists will feel differently about laws based upon how they personally feel. And so now that we're in such a hyper politicized time, you'll find that the judicial elections and school board elections that should typically be nonpartisan elections have turned into really hyper partisan elections in these times. There are 35 states that allow for cross-filing, so we're one of the 35 states that allow for this. You should know that State Representative Conklin, who also leads the State Government Committee as the majority in the House, went against State Senator Chris Gephardt and their stance on cross-filing. Conklin in favor of cross-filing remaining, and Gephardt wanting it to disappear and be eliminated. I'll say this is that increased chances of making it onto the November ballot, especially for those facing a primary challenge. You have an increased chance of making it onto the November ballot, especially for those facing a primary challenger, if a candidate cross-files. And County Board of Elections sample ballots can provide clarity. So if you are concerned that someone that you're interested in voting for may not be who you think they are, you can absolutely go to your County Board of Elections and request a sample ballot for clarity. That ballot should tell you what political party they truly belong to. All right, next slide. Some other fun facts here about cross-filing. Those who are running for school board, for example, they only are required to collect 10 petition signatures to actually get on the ballot. That's a pretty easy lift. So if you're someone watching today's call and you have interest in running for school board, you just need to get 10 people in your life that live in that area to sign a petition for you to run for that position where you live. So it's very easy to get on the ballot. There was one attempt to eliminate cross-filing. It stalled in the Senate in 2018. That's the furthest that it had gone to stop cross-filing in the Commonwealth. Again, all 3 attempts to stop cross-filing have all been led by Republicans in the General Assembly here in Harrisburg. Local elections tend to be low information elections, right? It doesn't get as much media coverage, media attention. And so school board races are hyper local, and attaching politics makes it a numbers game determined by which party has the best turnout. This is from my friend Susan Spica. She's an executive director of Education Voters of Pennsylvania. She also is someone who was on the Shippensburg area school district for several years. And she was quoted in the newspaper for just talking about, cross-filing and how it impacts school boards. And so it's her opinion that local elections tend to be low information elections, which is true. and that school board races are hyper local. And that if we attach politics, it makes it a numbers game, and that you need huge turnout in order for the person of the accurate political party to win an election. State Senator Judy Swank had a proposal to eliminate voter confusion, not to eliminate cross filing. This is Judy Swank out of Berks County. Um, to not eliminate cross filing, but eliminate the fact that voters don't know what political party these folks really belong to. And it was a proposal that she had in 2023 to say that, okay, if you want to cross file, we need to know on our ballots what political party you personally belong to, besides the cross filing. And the last, State Representative Conklin, again with the Gephardt stance on cross filing. And so you can go back, a quick Google, you can go back and you can see some of these articles and see some of these stories, watch some of these stories about cross filing from 2023, which was the last time we had these municipal elections, was 2023. Okay, next slide. I think we're towards the end. And we are. So
Mhm.
we're gonna take the presentation down for a moment, and we're gonna open this up. And feel free to ask any questions about tonight's presentation about cross filing, any questions you may have. And anyone who's attended Town Hall 101, 201, or 301, and you have any questions about those town halls that you didn't get to ask earlier, or you're prepared to ask tonight, please do. We have a good amount of time, which we wanted to. We want to have a good amount of time for you to ask your questions. If we can't get our elected officials to host a town hall, we're going to host this town hall. We're going to make
That's right.
sure your questions get answered.
Well, this has been a fantastic information session. I've learned so much. And we do have several questions that I want to make sure I get to in the chat. So, Ms. Kadita, if you are ready, we have our first question.
Okay, here we go.
Those judges that are honorable and support the law and the Constitution, how can we help support them?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So how do we support judges currently on the bench? If it's federal judges or if it's state judges, how do we support them? I think that's you support them by keeping them on the bench and retaining them. So that's one thing. So if they are magisterial judges, municipal judges in Philadelphia, they have retention elections every 6 years. So you want to pay attention to when these folks are up for retention election. Again, the common pleas courts, the intermediate appellate courts, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they're up for retention every 10 years. So if you are supportive of decisions that are being made, you want to make sure that you're keeping them on the bench. The other thing I would say is that any attempts to try to usurp their authority, such as impeachment or judicial gerrymandering, pay attention to these things as they come up so you can help to fight back against them when it happens. It is very important. That is how we fought back the judicial gerrymandering bill that went on for more than 2 years. It was because advocates like you, everyday Pennsylvanians who are learning more and more about the courts, said this is not right. I want to vote for all of these judges and justices, not just 3 that my elected officials tell me I'm allowed to. I'd also
Absolutely.
say one more part to that question would be um, attend some of these. Attend some of these trials. Attend some of you can witness these. The Judicial Center in Harrisburg, for example, when they're hearing cases potentially about mail-in ballots, etc., you can attend these. Absolutely, and you can take the kids with you. Let them witness democracy in action. It's a great way to support the courts. Let them all know we're paying attention to what's happening.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful answer. And Loretta did say, thank you for answering my question. And our next question is also quite interesting. Who funds the courts, the Fed or the states?
So the federal courts are funded by federal tax dollars. So the tax dollars that you, as taxpayers, are putting into the federal courts or the federal government are helping to pay the federal courts, the salaries of the judges and justices, and the entire system. Here in Pennsylvania, you again as the taxpayer. These are our courts. And so when we're out there and we're protesting and we're rallying and we're outside the United States Supreme Court or we're outside the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, we are saying our courts because these are our courts. We are paying for this with our tax dollars. Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent answer to that question, and very true. Our third question is, how does the Supreme Court get away with not disclosing any gifts and monetary contributions?
Constitutionally, it's allowed. There is nothing within the Constitution that allows for checks and balances against what it is they are doing. There are organizations such as the Leadership Conference, Alliance for Justice, Center for American Progress, and others who have been advocating for years to have more transparency as it relates to the United States courts, particularly the United States Supreme Court. And so this is up to you. We talk about a call to action. If you are interested in having more accountability for these federal judges, reach out to your U.S. Senator. That's who you reach out to for this. Reach out to your United States Senator and let them know that you are in favor of having more transparency. You want to know how these justices and judges are paying for their excursions overseas and for all the various trips and gifts they may be given. That's part of us as taxpayers. We pay their salaries. We should know exactly what it is they're doing. They should be held, in my opinion, at the same amount of accountability that we hold state judges and justices to. So the federal judges have a lot more leeway than absolutely the state judges and justices do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that answer. All right, on to our next question. This is regarding the retention elections portion of the presentation. So how do you know what they stand for? Do they have platforms on various issues if they cannot be listed as Republican or Democrat or other party?
Okay. That's a great question. Thank you for that question. So, retention elections, again, just a reminder, you will not see what political party that they belonged to on the first opportunity in which they were elected. You will not see that. And so, what you'll need to do as the concerned voter, the informed voter, look, the high information voter, is a quick Google of these judges and justices. That's how I have learned about my local common pleas judges who are up for retention. I Google them. I want to find out how, if they've been in the paper for decisions that they have made that maybe have gone against precedent. That's something I might want to learn. That if they've gone against the grain, you can learn that from a quick Google search. I have mentioned this previously when I lived in Harrisburg and I had just moved to Harrisburg. It was a judicial election year. I had no idea. I was coming from North Carolina. So I had no idea what I was doing on election day. And this was in 2017. And so I did a quick Google, found out that the judge that was up for retention was not a huge Colin Kaepernick fan. And for me, that was a deal breaker. And so I chose on election day not to retain him. Now, a reminder, it is very difficult not to retain a judge. It happens very few times in which a judge or justice is not retained. And you would have to launch a massive campaign to actually get a judge or justice off of the bench in a retention election. And that's again is why you have folks like Jeffrey Gaz and likely Elon Musk coming to Pennsylvania to drop millions of dollars to impact our retention elections. So the quicker answer to that question is, how do I find out? Also, go to your resources such as the ABA, the American Bar Association. They will have some information about a judge's temperament. A lot of those ratings come from their colleagues who speak to their performance on the bench. That's a great opportunity to Google them. Google American Bar Association alongside their name to find out how they disperse justice. That is the best way. Now, I will say this because our courts have become more partisan than usual, you might actually see a judge or a justice in your local community. Like I said, I did see Justice Donahue on Sunday at an event speaking to the retention elections. Typically, you probably would never see a Supreme Court justice out talking about a retention election because, again, historically, judges are retained without issue. This is different times. And so if you happen to come across a candidate forum, if you're joining us from Pittsburgh, please know we will be hosting candidate forums in Pittsburgh in the coming weeks in person. So if you come across a candidate for a judicial position, there's great questions that you can ask of them. We can get into that in a second. I hope that answers that
Absolutely.
question.
Yeah, and if you need more information, I thought that was an excellent answer. We do have a couple more. Oh, yeah, I have some great questions coming in. I think we'll go on to the next that says, I really like this one. This is on cross-filing. Is it correct that you can only cross-file in our local elections?
Yes, in Pennsylvania, during municipal, local judicial elections is the only time in which you can cross file. I'll say this though, there was a case in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where there was a cross filing for the mayoral race in Allentown, where the Democrat cross filed to go up against an independent in the general election. So, yes, for the most part, cross filing is only done in school board elections and municipal judicial elections. Is the majority, the overwhelming majority of cross filing. And you in Pennsylvania, there is no cross filing in presidential and midterm elections because those are inherently partisan elections. Folks who are running to be U.S. senator, they have platforms, and so those are inherently partisan elections.
Absolutely. And I think too, it's also confusing which seats you can do it for. So that's always confusing too. So yeah. All right, excellent answer on that one. Let's see here. We do have a couple more questions rolling in, so I'm cataloging them as they roll in because I think as people hear more information, they have more questions. So another great question is, so what's the difference between being independent and
Mhm.
cross-filing?
Okay, great
I
question.
like that question.
So, as a voting rights organization, as an organization that does lots of voter registration, we have to clarify this all the time. So, when we are registering folks on the ground and we're encouraging them to choose their own political party because our voter registration efforts are nonpartisan, a lot of times folks will say, I'm really not in love with either party. I don't like the Democrats. I don't like Republicans. I don't want to belong to either one of those. Well, at that point, these folks are actually unaffiliated voters. They may say I'm independent, right? That might be the language that they use, but truly they are unaffiliated because there is a political party called the Independent Party, just like there is the Working Families Party, just like there is the Rent is Too Damn High Party. These are all real parties that exist. And so if you do not want to belong to any political party, then you are an unaffiliated voter. So the independent, uh, when that term is used, right? If someone says, I'm running for office as an independent, they belong to the independent. They should belong to the independent party. So, someone's gonna have to check me on this. I'm curious I have some Bernie Sanders fans here today in the Zoom room. I'm looking at Katie and some others. Bernie Sanders is known independent from Vermont. Does anybody know? Is Bernie Sanders actually part of the independent party or is he just unaffiliated?
Hmm, that's a good question. I'd like to know the answer to that too. Definitely put it in the chat if you know. All right, I like that question a lot. So the next question we have here is, when court rulings are not followed, what recourse do state and federal courts have? And consequently, voters.
Okay. Yeah, read the question one more time, Kamika. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. When court rulings are not followed, what recourse do state and federal courts have?
Right. Okay. So we're kind of approaching this, which is a constitutional crisis if court orders are not being followed. And so, those of you on this call today, I'm sure you've been following along a lot of the immigrant rights cases that are happening, the deportations that are happening. You've heard about district court judges that have the authority to say that the Trump administration should not be doing certain actions and should be pausing on actions. And they've asked them, and we know that the Trump administration has said, we don't have to listen to district courts. Well, the recourse that we have is that this is where the circuit courts can jump in to assist, is where the United States Supreme Court can jump in to assist, because district courts, when they disagree, that means we take them up to the next level. So if we have district courts, let's say in Pennsylvania, and we have the Middle District of Pennsylvania District Court, and we have the Eastern District Court of Pennsylvania disagreeing about a certain issue or case, then that is when the Third Circuit Court of Appeals would come into play to just to make the determination. And in some cases, it would go right to the United States Supreme Court. So to answer this question that's being asked is, what is the recourse? the state courts have jurisdiction on anything revolving around state issues, state constitution. It is only when the state courts are giving us less rights than are afforded by the federal government that the federal government would step in. So, for instance, the federal government, there's the Voting Rights Act, although it has been dismantled for the most part. The Federal Voting Rights Act is a federal act. And if Pennsylvania is not following the letter of the law of the Voting Rights Act that is federal, then that is when the federal courts would jump in and say you are not, you are not following along with the Voting Rights Act. Now, Pennsylvania could have its own Voting Rights Act, and we advocate for that, a Voting Rights Act here in Pennsylvania, and that could actually have more rights for voters than even the federal government allows. So you should know that jurisdiction, it stops here, depending upon um, what the law is that it needs to be determined by these various courts. I don't think we completely know what could happen in a true constitutional crisis if the courts are being ignored. There's been articles, and we've talked about this in previous town halls, of people saying, it's the money, it's the withholding of the money that would allow for the courts to stay powerful in that moment. But I don't think we know because we haven't been here before.
That's right. This is a brand new situation. Okay, next question we have, and I really like this question because it speaks to the need for this kind of discourse. How do you suggest talking to people about this stuff? What's a good approach?
Great question. The majority of people don't care, right? The majority of people just don't care about this. The majority of people right now care about the basic um, issues in their life. How am I affording rent? How am I affording childcare? How am I affording the price of groceries? The average person just does not care about this issue. This is not going to drive a huge amount of people to the polls. And so what we must do as advocates and activists is we must talk about how the courts are relative to all these things in our lives. That I always say to add the courts on top. So if you're advocating to raise the minimum wage, if you're advocating to have greater LGBTQ protections, then you must also consider the courts and add them on top. So when talking about how do we get people to care about this, how do we communicate this with the average person? It is taking this that you're hearing today, sharing this link. It is going to be on the Facebook page of New Pennsylvania Project. Share this out. I am not a lawyer. I've never been a lawyer or a judge, right? I'm a journalist by trade. And so I think a special power is being able to communicate some things that could be complicated and just make it common sense for the average individual so they totally understand. It's hard to get somebody to advocate for something they don't truly understand. And so we've got to make this real for people. So when we're talking about how do we get just the average person to care about this, you have to connect it to their real life issues. So if they care about the cost of food, then they should know that it is the courts that can make determinations about such things and connecting the dots for individuals. Landlord disputes, right? You care about
Mhm.
being kicked out of where it is that you're living. Well, it is the courts that make these determinations and will settle disputes between you and your landlord.
That's right. And also, you have the right to a fair trial. So if the courts are being attacked, your fundamental right as an American citizen is being attacked as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have a couple more, and we are nearing the end of our time together. So we're going to get to one more, and then we are going to get to our closing, so we can make sure we do that. So this is also a great question. How do you get money out of our elections for judicial retention? Is there a platform to do that?
Yeah, there's lots of campaigns to get money out of politics, right? And so if we're having partisan elections, there is that opportunity. Retention elections are nonpartisan, elections because there is no political party following their name. How do we get money out of politics? I think that we have to talk about the fact that there is money in our politics in this moment, and now they are seeping into our courts and our judicial elections, which can be problematic. I think this is just a bigger issue for those that have been advocating for getting money out of politics for quite some time. I think about March on Harrisburg, an organization called March on Harrisburg, is that what they're calling you, March on Harrisburg? Is that what their name is? Somebody tell me. John Coffey, you know. Rabbi, with the rabbi leading them, right? So they've been advocating for a very long time to get money out of politics. And so there is no answer for this upcoming election. If it is Jeffrey Gaz that wants to come in with his millions of dollars, and he's already donated, and if it is Elon Musk who wants to come in, he has already given, what is it now, $40 million in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, to make change and impact, right? Because I believe it is that he wants to put car dealerships in Wisconsin. So he really cares about what happens in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race. So yeah, this is what we have to advocate for, is getting money out of politics in general. And there's organizations, like I said, Marshall and Harrisburg and others who have been advocating for this for quite some time, and follow the money, follow the money. I wish I had a different
Absolutely.
answer for, I wish I had a different answer for you,
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to really root that out, as you have outlined.
especially with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, right?
Yes.
As we gutted the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, it has allowed for corporations to count as people and have a
Yeah,
vote with their
that's
money.
right.
Yeah.
So we have one last question. I really like this question because it really gets at the heart of, what's happening right now in our country. Can the executive branch defund and close federal courts?
So, as mentioned in that earlier article that we showed about Mike Johnson saying that he was interested in closing some federal courts, absolutely. It has been done historically before. They can absolutely shut down some of the district courts in the federal government. It has been done before. And so, yes, Congress does have that power. Can they shut down the United States Supreme Court? I don't think so. They don't have that jurisdiction. They don't have that capacity, but they absolutely have jurisdiction to defund certain district courts. And it has been done before.
Yes, indeed. And then so we have about 5 minutes left. If it's okay with Ms. Kadida, we are going to take some of the questions that were a little out of scope, and we're going to get those answers to you because they're still important. We have questions on early voting. We have questions on other things. So those things are important, but we do want to give you some great information to end the session, if that's okay with you, Ms. Kadida.
Yes, yes. And I'll say this as I close out here and get ready to pass the baton back to you all. I thank you all for joining us. Those of you who have been on for 4 or 3 or 2 or just one of these town halls, thank you for being with us this evening. Pennsylvania voters, you are powerful. You're more powerful than you probably even know. And I implore all of you to reach out to people in your life and get them to the polls this judicial election. This one really matters. Every time, every election, I say this election is the most important of your life. My goodness, this is the most important election of our judicial lives here in the Commonwealth. Please get out there and vote. I saw one comment that says that people are starting to care more and more about things just besides money, right? They're caring about voting rights, et cetera. Absolutely. So not to say that people really don't care about these things. They absolutely care about putting food on the table. They absolutely care about the cost of drugs. They absolutely care about the cost of healthcare and having access to that. There are a lot of people coming around right now and really being awakened by what is happening. And so keep it up. Don't stop. And our early voting, same day voting, still things we're advocating for here in the Commonwealth. Reach out to your state representative, reach out to your state senator, let them know here in Pennsylvania, we want a Voting Rights Act for the Commonwealth. And we would like to have true early voting on machines. We would like to have same day voter registration like they have in North Carolina, like they have in Georgia. They also have a much better rate of people being registered to vote. There's still 1.2 million Pennsylvanians eligible to vote, not registered. That's way too many.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kadida. You guys just put some snaps in the chat. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us. I know these are very disconcerting times, but this is so important that we get information and we arm ourselves with that information and take steps forward. So as we go into our slide on additional resources, we want you, and I'm also going to drop them in the chat for you so you have the direct links. Please go ahead and look at that information for And I dropped everything in the chat for you so you'll have ease of access. We have information for Pennsylvanians for Modern Court's website, public access to court electronic records, accountable to none, the urgent need for Supreme Court ethics reforms from the AFJ, our United States Judiciary Committee questionnaires, and the Unified Judicial System of Pennsylvania web portal. So please go ahead and take note of that information. And we're also going to give our call to action. Would you like so this is 4-4, okay? This is 4-4. So are you interested in something like this? Was this helpful to you? If this was helpful to you, and I know it was helpful to me today, I would love for you to please let us know. I want to help you book a presentation with your group. And I want to make sure that we get this information into your community. So please let us know. You can drop it in the chat right now. And you can also email me. My stuff will be on the last slide, and also put it in the chat to make sure that you get a presentation in your community for your group, for your organization. We will do it almost anywhere. Okay. The next thing, are you registered to vote and eligible to vote in the primary? The primary is less than 60 days away, ladies and gentlemen, and my babies and gabies. It is not far from now, and it affects every single one of our lives, okay? Every single one of our lives. So make sure that you are registered to vote in this primary by April the 5th. April the 5th is the last day, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. That is the last day to register to vote. So please make sure that you do that before the May 20 primary, less than 60 days away. And of course, follow us on social media. We have lots of wonderful information that, I'm sorry, May 5th, I apologize. May 5th is the last day to register to vote for the Pennsylvania primary, 2 weeks before the Pennsylvania primary on May the 20th. The next thing that we want to talk about is calling your senators. We have a short script here to help you to call your senators and make sure that you are taking action to make sure that we have independent, fair, and qualified judges, right? Independent, fair, and qualified judges. So we have a script here. Here are your senators, Senator Dave McCormick and Senator John Fetterman. Their information is on the screen. Take a snap, click, if you need to, or you can print screen to make sure that you get that information. All right, and here's a short script to do that. Next up on the docket is our very important dates. So we have our municipal dates. May 5th is the last day to register to vote. May 13th is the last day to apply for a mail-in ballot. If you have not taken with ease the wonderful way to apply for a mail-in ballot and actually use your ballot, please go ahead and do that. I've done it in every election since mailing ballot has come into fruition in Pennsylvania. It is a wonderful way to vote. And I'm going to pass it over to Katie really quickly to do our how to give and how to be engaged and how to donate. Katie, please let us know how to do that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kamika. Hi, everyone. Katie Personette, the Chief Development and Grants Officer. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I feel like this is our 10th event that we've held. These have been just incredible to really be in community with you all in the Zoom room for now the 401 and the ending of our series. But don't worry, as you heard from Kamika, there are plenty ways to get this presentation to your network, to your local community. So definitely take advantage of that. But if you like what you heard this evening and, it really affected you, I saw so much love and praise in the chat. Think about supporting our organization, investing in this year-round civic engagement and education. We have an incredible team here, incredible staff of 65 and continuing to grow. And your donations, your generosity support year-round civic education and voter engagement. And especially in an odd year election, when it is critical to provide this civic education, not just around our state judiciary, but also around our municipal and local elections, to ensure that everybody votes in every election twice a year. Your generosity is what makes this go around. So I know that there's so many friendly faces on this call who have been original supporters and original donors since 2021 when we were founded, and we are so happy that you are still with us and that you are still following our growth. Shout out John Coffey as well. It just, every time we do one of these calls, it just reminds me why this is so important. And so I just really want to take the moment to thank you all for joining us. on the Zoom room on opening day of baseball, my fellow baseball fans. And please reach out if you have any questions to me directly. Let me go to the next slide so you can see that my email is there. But please support the New Pennsylvania Project. For those who are interested in supporting the New Pennsylvania Project, is a 501c4 organization, so donations are not tax deductible. But if you are looking for a tax deductible option, and you specifically are in love with the courts and want to support our Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania project, that project lives out of the new PA Project Education Fund. That is a 501c3 organization. So that does give you that tax deduction. And I will put that link here in the chat, and I'm sure both of those links will go into a follow-up email that will be sent to you all. So I will pass back over to Kamika to say goodnight.
Thank
Before
you,
Kamika
Katie.
closes us out, I'm sorry, before Kamika closes out, there were two questions in the chat that I want to make sure we address tonight. Very important. One was, are you going to post these videos in places other than Facebook? People have gotten off of X, people have gotten out of Facebook. Gabby Huerta is with us this evening. She's our Director of Strategic Communications. These videos will also go up on our Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania YouTube page shortly. So we'll make sure that we're going to send everybody a thank you for joining us tonight. You will also get the information so that you can watch these videos on Why Courts Matter PA's YouTube page, so that you don't have to go onto Facebook or X if you don't want to watch these. The last thing I'll say is, someone asked, executive order that was just signed by Donald Trump on yesterday, asked if that's going to impact our 2025 elections this year. That executive order has no bearing on our 2025 judicial, municipal, and local elections. Carry on. Come out and vote, cast your ballot, and bring some friends with you to the polls.
Mhm. That's right. And that is the point of the story. Don't let everything that is happening scare you out of voting. Your vote counts. Voters are at the top of the organizational chart, not the bottom. Your vote counts. Every vote counts. Get out to vote. Thank you for joining us this evening. We hope to see you again. Please email me. We want to come and do this presentation for you and yours. And we will see you soon. Thank you so much from our bottom of our hearts to yours. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.